folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I want to talk today about the economy, but more specifically, the U.S. dollar. And this has been actually a topic that we've covered a little bit, but today there's some new information that's coming out that it's always interesting and amazing how when there are things that light gets shown on them that are very important, that are could be very devastating, you don't hear much about it. I mean, you hear all kinds of stuff about some actor and another actor getting a divorce and all that kind of stuff. But when it's something that's actually very critical to the health and the future of this nation, you hear very little about it. So we're going to talk about that here in just a minute, because there's just a lot going on, and we're being lied to so constantly. I mean, I know politicians have always lied, but at least they were pretty good at making it sound like a believable, truth. Now they just don't care. I mean, they'll just absolutely lie to your face and laugh about it. And well, what's even more crazy is that so many people actually believe it. So we'll get into that here in just a minute. I want to give you just some updates on farm and ag news from what I'm hearing here locally. I've got several friends around here that I've built good relationships with that are into farming and ranching, and so they kind of keep me updated on just some stuff going on. And one farmer, he told me he does hay, and he said that he is getting this year on his first cutting, which he expects it to probably be the only cutting. Now there's calling for rain here in the Ozarks next week. If we get a decent amount of rain, it's possible that they could get a second cutting out of everything. But he was talking about how desperate things are when it comes to hay for cattle. And he said he was averaging getting out of fields when he was cutting a few weeks back. He was getting about half of the hay out of the field of what he was getting in last year on second cutting hay. So based on what he would get on the second cutting of hay this year, first cutting was about half of that. And that's why we're seeing, hay prices skyrocketing. Those of you that have farm animals, livestock of some sort that eat hay, you're seeing prices skyrocket. And it's not just that prices are skyrocketing, it's hard to find. I mean, they're so rare to even find decent hay. And so that's going to be a problem. He was also talking to me about it. His friend of his runs an auction house for cattle down by the Missouri-Arkansas state line. And he said he talked to him this week, and this past weekend, they had their, every weekend they have a sale, auction there. He said typically they run between 500 and 600 calves through, this time of the year on the weekend. He said this past weekend they ran 5,000 cows, not calves, cows through. He said they were there all night and into the next day. And for those of you that have ever worked in the cattle business, I understand it at all. Understanding the difference between them selling cows and not calves, especially at those numbers, is pretty shocking. The coming storm out of this and many other things, folks, I feel is going to be pretty great when we're seeing this mass reduction of the nation's herd. It's going to take years to rebuild that if we can, because all of this zero carbon Agenda 2030 stuff, they want to reduce the herds. They're going to do everything they can to keep from these herds being brought back up to normal levels. So we may never again see herds the size that we have in our lifetime. Before I get started, I do want to mention one other thing. If you're still interested in getting one of those Alexa Pure water filters, it's the big stainless steel tabletop gravity fed filter. These things, they filter out 99.9999% of contaminants. It's a 2¼ gallon holding filter. And it filters through. It comes with one filter, which also filters fluoride and chlorine. They're still running their sale. It's a limited time sale, $199, and that's the filter, the whole shebang filter, and the filter inside of it and the container. So if you're interested in that, there is a link down in the description below. So, economy's not doing great. I mean, we're told by people like the president's financial advisor and the spokesperson for the White House and all that, oh, the economy is great. It's great. I don't know why everyone's talking about it. I mean, people are spending their savings. You know, they're taking their hard-earned savings and they're just dumping it into the economy. That means it's great. That's a good sign. Which is absolutely ridiculous, because people are spending their hard-earned savings because they're going broke, and prices are so high that they're having to pull out of their savings just to pay to live, just to buy the normal living items, food and gasoline and other items. But yet I've heard from people in the White House that that's a good thing. That's a sign that the economy is strong. And it's not, folks, and we know that. We see the inflation rising. Just this week, the numbers for new unemployment claims came out, and they were high. They were higher than expected to be. And this is a really bad deal, because for the Federal Reserve to work their magic and raise interest rates and try to bring down the recession, the only way that that can really work is if the unemployment rate is down also. You know, if people aren't working, then it's going to make a pretty bad situation, and almost impossible for the Federal Reserve to actually fix things with their scope and power. But there's actually other things going on too, and it's the not just the buying power, but the overall respect and faith in the U.S. dollar. And this is something I've spoken about for several weeks now, or months, of how we're seeing little signs, little cracks in the system to indicate that the power of the dollar, the faith in the U.S. dollar, is waning globally. We've seen where China and Saudi Arabia have been having discussions about purchasing oil from Saudi Arabia using Chinese currency and not the U.S. dollar. We've heard that BRICS, the organization, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America are considering coming up with their own global reserve currency. Little by little, we're seeing the little cracks in it. Well, something came out this week, just a day or two ago, that in my personal opinion may be the biggest news yet, when it's showing that that the U.S. dollar is collapsing. And that's this: China has been dumping U.S. debt. Some of you may not understand what that means, but a lot of you do. China has been dumping U.S. debt quite a bit over the past year, especially in the last 6 months. It seems that they're increasing that. They used to have over $1 trillion in U.S. debt, and they're now below $1 trillion. They've been selling off in the numbers between 10 and 20 billion, sometimes more than that, every month of U.S. Treasury, even though they're still in a position as a nation that they kind of depend on that. They also realize, and I think they're doing it for reasons of hurting us. They want to get that out of there, because they know that it's going to collapse, and they know that they have the power to collapse our currency and to bankrupt this nation, because that's exactly what it would do. If China dumped all their debt, and you know they own $1 trillion of it, and we're 31 trillion in debt, so we're talking 3% or just a little under that they have owned. And a lot of people debate on whether or not that would actually be enough to collapse us. Well, there's one thing that most people don't consider. If China just immediately or very rapidly dumps all of their debt that they own of U.S. debt, most likely there's going to be other countries do it too. There'll be this selling off frenzy, and other nations that hold U.S. debt would probably follow. And then the whole faith in the U.S. dollar would drastically drop. And most likely we would see the United States government go into bankruptcy because of that. But the thing is it's not just China that's doing this. Japan is the largest holder in U.S. Treasury debt. They own more than anyone else, and they're doing the same things, folks. And they're not some enemy that wants to destroy us. They're apparently are one of our friends. They're an ally, or the new term, partner. And they are selling off U.S. debt also. Along with them, Saudi Arabia, India, Australia, and several other countries that hold U.S. treasuries are selling them off. This is not good, folks. In fact, the numbers are showing that over the last 6 months, it's somewhere, and it's kind of hard to find accurate numbers, but in the research I was looking, somewhere in the neighborhood of around $500 billion in U.S. Treasury globally has been dumped, They've gotten rid of it. They've sold it off. This, maybe I'm wrong, and some of you folks listening are much better at economics than I am. I dabble in it a little bit. You know, I just kind of play an economist on TV. But my understanding is this is a really, really bad thing. It used to be the most secure investment that a person could make, an individual or a nation, was U.S. Treasury bonds. That was the most secure. I mean, it may not have produced massive yields, but it was absolutely secure. It was considered probably as secure as gold. You knew that if you invested your money by buying some U.S. debt through the U.S. Treasury bond system, that you were going to get that money back. You'd make a little bit. You would guaranteed to get back what you put in it, and you would make a little bit on top of that. Now people are realizing they're not so sure of that. They're not so sure on the long term because, you know, some of these treasuries, 10, 30 years, in 30 years, will the United States dollar, U.S. dollar be in existence? Will the economy have crashed by then? And so people are realizing that the strength, the power, the faith in the U.S. economy and the U.S. dollar isn't nearly what it used to be. And when we start seeing nations like China and Japan and Australia, Saudi Arabia and India and many others selling off their U.S. Treasury debt, that's a bad, bad deal, folks. That is an absolute recipe for disaster. We see that in conjunction with massive increase in U.S. debt and constant spending and other countries starting to look at other options for the global reserve currency trade. We, I believe, are seeing the beginnings, the makings of the collapse of the U.S. dollar. How long will it take? I don't know. Again, I'm not an economist. Could it happen in weeks? Could it happen in months? Could it happen in a couple of years or a decade or two? Sure, any of those would fit. I think it's probably going to be less than more. And what that means for you and I, from just a preparedness alone perspective, is absolutely disaster. If the U.S. dollar completely collapsed and became worthless, our entire economy would collapse. It would be easily on par with a major EMP attack as far as how big of a disaster that would be. The videos that you've probably seen out of Sri Lanka are nothing compared to what would happen here in the United States. Go look up and see what happened in Venezuela. That's getting you a little bit better idea of what happens, but I think it would even be worse than that because Americans just can't wrap their heads around this. That most Americans just, there's no way that this would ever happen. And we're starting to see the cracks form in the almighty dollar. And the way, the path that we're going, unless this ship is radically turned around, and it's turned around fast, the directions that we're headed, it's only going to get worse. We're only going to see more countries sell off their debt. We're only going to see countries more and more question the safety and security of the U.S. dollar and seek other ways to transfer things like oil or do other kinds of business. And when we start seeing countries sell off their U.S. Treasury bonds and we start seeing people dump U.S. dollar out of their holdings, which is happening also, even Israel, Japan, other countries have dumped some, not lots, but still they're dumping some of U.S. dollar in their banks. We're starting to see more and more around the world that the United States dollar, the United States economy, the United States government is not the strength and the powerful rock that it once was. Which is a strong, strong indicator that we are in the midst of a collapse. We're maybe not to the point that it's absolute chaotic like Sri Lanka, but it's definitely happening. Folks, you've got to get prepared. Get your houses in order. Prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.